You're listening to Barbell Logic,
the podcast where we talk about what it means to experience strength
and how you can use simple, hard, and effective strategies in training and nutrition to improve your life.
It starts with meeting you where you are right now and finding lasting solutions.
Welcome to the show.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Barbell Logic podcast, to Beast Over Burden. I'm your host, Nikki Sims. With me across the table is Andrew Jackson.
Good afternoon.
Hello. So on this episode of Beast Over Burden, I am taking the opportunity to pick your brain, Andrew, because I have a handful of clients who, I'm just going to get right to the point today.
Okay, let's jump into it.
I want to know the answers. I want to know all the answers.
No training recap.
I don't care. Just kidding.
No nutrition, no defluff updates.
Oh, fluff isn't even in the picture anymore.
Oh.
We are both lean and mean and ready for the beach.
That's true. Taking two slightly different approaches. I mean, fundamentally, same things are changing. Obviously, fewer calories in.
Yes. You and I are taking different approaches.
The methods.
Yes.
Mostly because my margin for error is significantly larger. I was nearly 260 pounds trying to lose, less than 2% of my body weight or something like that. I don't know.
That's
and you
different.
were about 100 pounds lighter than me, trying to lose like 20% of your body.
About 20%. That's a lot.
Jackson exaggeration.
Yes. I recently compared what it feels like lately to just constantly running on like an eighth of a tank of gas or a quarter of a tank of gas.
Oh.
Just
The energy is lower?
like that's how low the margin for error is.
Oh, right.
I notice if my calories are low. I feel it.
Right.
Yeah. And you're just like, wow, what is this sensation I am experiencing? Could this be what hunger is like?
If I don't eat for like 2 days.
Yeah. And that's me in like 75 minutes.
You have about 15 minutes from the time, my observation at least, 15 minutes from the first warning sign that you
I could be hungry.
might be hungry to complete meltdown.
Yeah.
I mean, I shouldn't say it that way, but it's like not a good place to be.
I can't even form sentences. If I get to that point and then it's my responsibility to figure out what to eat, my response is to overthink everything and not eat.
That is interesting. Not an effective strategy from an evolutionary standpoint. It seems to me that if you were in dire need of more calories, the body would get really good at finding calories.
No, I'm like, well, if I only have this meal next, what's the best restaurant I can eat at? How close is it? Should I have an RX bar? No, I don't want to waste calories on that. And then I map out the rest of my calories for the day and then wonder if that's what I really want. And I'm meant to be alive in 2023.
Well,
not in 1023.
In fairness, as I like to say, your strategy is very detail oriented. And you are incredibly compliant to a high degree of precision. And so I can understand how it would be difficult because your capacity to reason goes down
yes.
when you hit that point. And you have a lot of variables you're trying to juggle while still trying not to just be in pure suffer mode,
Yeah.
you know, like that, which is, I think, is a cool thing about what you're doing with essentially counting your macros and weighing and measuring, but you are managing the macro budget in a way to still enable you to enjoy the food, include ice cream.
Very important.
It's not like a, white knuckle kind of a approach, at least. Correct me if you think I'm way off here, but it's not like a starvation diet or anything crazy, but the cost of that is a lot of mental overhead.
Yeah, it's a lot of mental. Yeah, it's a good way to put it. And that saps the battery of decision making.
Right.
And it's easier when I'm in a controlled environment. I'm in my house. I'm at your house. I know what the food options are.
Right.
I know ahead of time where we're going to eat. But if it's like budgeting for a dinner that we're going to go to later,
right,
or traveling coming up, or somewhere where I don't know what we're going to be eating and what the macros are, it gets really stressful.
That said, what do you say? 9 times out of 10, it's eat the RX bar, get a couple hundred calories, and then make a make the decision.
Yeah. Everything's going to be okay.
But that's what's amazing about it is that it's literally 100, maybe 200 calories that tips the balance from warning lights, engine failure to
wheels are off.
We can keep going.
Yeah.
We'll be all right. Yeah, that is a great analogy of driving on a quarter tank.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Or from what I've heard people describe, driving a Tesla versus driving a gas power tank. Like Tesla owners are constantly having to triangulate like where the next charging station is, schedule their day so they have enough time to recharge and then get back at it. And some people will never say a negative thing about a Tesla.
Yeah.
But if you do talk to the ones that have been doing it for a while, they do mention the mental overhead of kind of keeping that in the back of your mind.
Man, I don't think I would like that.
Yeah.
Good to know.
Mm-hmm. So anyways, as we jump right into it, 15 minutes later.
Anyway, we're lean. It's working. We're excited about it. Yep. Consistency and compliance works 100% of the time.
I'm down about 10 pounds, and that's average, plus or minus still 2 pounds, and about 1.5 inches, 2 inches, maybe.
It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And
seems like I have had to work much harder to lose 0.5 inch off my waist.
Well, yeah. I mean, again, because I got 100 pounds on you and I was just under 40 inches. Like that would have been existential problem mode if I was at over 40 inches, but just under 40 inches. And now I'm floating back under 38 inches. So
nice.
I got a lot less to cut. Well, a lot lower hanging fruit. We'll put it that way.
Okay. Yeah. Lower hanging fruit.
Fruit.
Okay. So back to my very important question. I have a handful of clients, and I know this is wonderfully something that a lot of our clients experience, is having a baby. And for my clients, it's actually their wives who are having babies. And it just blows up training. And that's totally to be expected. It's a requirement to try and keep this new human alive.
It is work.
Yes.
It is work.
Is it hard but doable?
It is hard but doable.
Is it voluntary hardship?
Yeah, arguably. Yeah. I think it's the extent and the type of hardship catches people off guard if they've never had one before. But even if they have had a kid before, each one you add, there's another level of complexity. Now you're juggling a newborn with a kid. Maybe in my most recent case was number 3. Now you're playing zone, as they say, instead of man to man. So yeah, it's voluntary hardship, and the hardship doesn't stop. It's not like you can stop choosing the hardship.
Yeah.
Once you volunteer, you have the initial volunteering.
And the hardship.
And then the hardship is for the rest of your life. And hopefully for the rest of your life.
Yes, ideally.
Which is one of the things I'm discovering. You just never stop thinking about them.
Yeah.
At some level. It's there now.
Parenting by Andrew. Well, that's what I noticed, like when we're hanging out with your daughter, is you always want to make sure they're alive and that they're okay and that they're getting what they need, and their schedule's really dynamic. And sometimes you have to worry about other people's kids. And what I've noticed from you is you have to be very ready to be flexible.
Yes. It is extremely difficult to have any kind of predictable schedule.
Yeah.
I think most parents would acknowledge that you build this skill set of, it's like a readiness to adapt to constant, unpredictable change of events.
Yeah.
And, some people are better at others at having a structured schedule, but, you're just constantly having to adjust it. And I think that becomes the challenge, is figuring out how to still do the things that you want to do while having that ability to be fluid.
Yeah.
With whatever the needs are of the moment.
Yeah.
And I mean, I have some friends who have continued their life as if they didn't have 2 kids. Incredibly, I have one friend that was a world traveler, mountain climbing, all this stuff. And I remember thinking, oh yeah, wait till they have a kid and their whole lives are going to change. Nope. kept on going. Some people just figured it out, and their kids adapt and they adapt, and just what I've found for those individuals is the bar just keeps getting lowered.
Okay. In terms of like what you can control and what's important to you, and like, okay, like certain standards for things,
certain
being
standards,
on time. And,
expectation to be on time, expectation for things to be a certain level of cleanliness, expectations for the living situation to be organized in such a way.
Yeah.
Are you willing to live in total chaos of a camper van, and just cram everybody in and figure out how to sleep?
Mhm.
That's what this rock climbing couple was doing, is they continued to travel all over the world in a van. And they had this, by, I would say, most people's standards, a sleeping setup that was unacceptable. The square footage per human was incredibly small.
Yes.
And kids were in hammocks, like dangling out of the ceiling. But they were completely content with that. And it enabled them to keep doing the things they wanted to do. So I think being clear on your priorities and your standards, and then adjusting those to figure out how to kind of thread the needle of or triangulate how you want to live your life is the crux of that.
And I can't help but be curious. Like, I have worked with a couple women around like giving birth and after giving birth, but mostly I've worked with men whose wives have given birth. And it seems like they will be full bore on their training until they no longer can, which is usually the day that the baby is born. And there's a different transition period where the women have to, modify their training for almost 9 months in some way.
Right.
And then they know they can't train for a certain time. And then they're rebuilding their body in a certain way and their training style. But it seems like it's such a different experience for a new dad, where it goes from highly structured, regimented training, PRs, 4-day splits, like taking 90 minutes per session, to not sleeping and then hopefully maybe getting to train for 20 minutes 3 times a week.
Right.
And that seems like that really fast gear switch has led to what I've noticed, 0% training, 100% to 0% training. And I'm curious what kind of advice you have for that kind of big life change.
Yeah, that is the parenting experience for dads in general. The training is, like many things in life, a snapshot of that experience, because you'll often hear dads talk about, or the difference between moms and dads is that the mom starts building the relationship with their child the 9 months leading up to the day of birth, and their lives are having to be significantly modified, not just with training, but their sleep starts getting affected. Their body composition and just bodies are obviously radically changing for 9 months leading up to that moment. Whereas the dads, you can be proactive about getting engaged, and obviously there's some lifestyle changes that happen, but it's very different. And you have this sudden radical change on the day of the birth that's all of a sudden, all at once.
Yeah.
Everything, everywhere, all at once. Distills down into that moment. And if you haven't been preparing for that mentally, or planning for the degree to which your life is going to change, it can feel overwhelming.
Yeah.
And if your mental model of training is that it needs to be 4 days a week for 90 minutes a session, and you're going to do 2 compound lifts and maybe some accessories or supplemental.
And you've decided that that's what you need, and you have to do that much to progress.
It's almost like an identity shift. Like your identity is a 4-day lift, or maybe it's a 3-day lift, but your identity is built around this training structure that if you haven't started preparing you for that identity shift, it's really hard to do. And so you get to the other side and you just don't have a vision for what training can or should look like when it's not 3 or 4 days a week for an hour to 2 hours a session.
That's actually making me think of one of my clients who, his wife just had a baby. It was like 2 weeks ago or something. And he and I had a call before, because he's like, I have to change what I'm doing. And he did that. He was like, I think he was avoiding being overwhelmed with baby number 2. And he's like, okay, I know I'm only going to have this much time. Work is still bonkers right now.
Yes.
What is it going to look like?
Right.
So he tried to create that vision.
That's, I think, the difference between somebody having kid 1 versus kid 2. Or in my situation, I was working with a client last year who was about to have kid 3, and he called me 3 months in advance.
Okay, nice. Yeah.
And I thought, okay, this is going to be the cancellation call, because he's like, hey, I got a, kid number 3 coming in, and I just don't know if I can keep doing this. Because his training was going really, he was going hard.
Yeah.
He was hitting a lot of PRs, 1 rep max, singles, triples, 5s, 4-day split, 2 primary lifts, and usually a supplemental and an accessory and conditioning.
Big training.
Yeah, this guy was doing
That's big.
everything. And we were actually in the middle of a volume block. His sessions were between 40 minutes and a little over an hour.
Yeah.
He's a very efficient worker, former CrossFit guy, competed like 10, 15 years ago. So he's got a huge work capacity, recreational cyclist. But he knew that this was going to be big. And he also knew it was going from 2 to 3.
Yeah.
Which was going to be, another level of complexity. So anyways, I thought it was going to be the cancellation call, but I said, and through the course of the conversation, I could tell he wanted to keep training. So I saw that as an opportunity, almost like working with somebody who's going through an injury, because I think there's some overlap between that change of identity that's required, just like we were talking about with Joel on the last call. You kind of have to retool your expectations and what it is that you're doing with your training. So we shifted, first and foremost, the goal from accumulating X number of tonnage or hitting certain PRs or even caring really at all about the weight on the bar. From that to the priority being showing up and doing something. And we came up with a plan. Initially, it was actually a 6-day a week, 1 lift a day at moderate volume, moderate intensity. So we stripped out all the supplemental, all the accessory work, got it down to just squat, bench, press, and deadlift. Typically 1 of those each week, but we would occasionally get a second lift, but we would sort of like rotate through. So it was always an upper, lower kind of alternation.
Sure.
And that allowed a couple of things. One, obviously, the goal of the workout was to keep it short. I'm looking at his calendar right now, and he was averaging about 10-ish minutes per workout.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Honestly, if I thought I could do, I wouldn't even think that I could do 1 lift in 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So to me, that program, the sound of it, without ever doing it myself, just that, there's no way.
It doesn't compute, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's a perfect example, because for most people that are training a lot, going to the gym is a 1 to 2 hour activity.
Blocked out on the schedule. You prepare for it.
Right.
Yeah.
But we set this up to kind of, like I was talking about earlier, remove all expectations from a performance standpoint, lower the standard. I wanted this to be workout that he did not have to change clothes for.
Right.
He could, the squat, that stuff to do.
Just take the pants off.
I think I might have actually gave him that advice. If it's squat day, just take the pants off, put the shoes on.
Yeah.
But the weights were significantly lower. I'm looking at, so he went from doing 3x5 at 135 pounds to 3x5 at 115 for his overhead press. Deadlift was going from 2x3 at 380 or a single at 405 down to 3x5 at 275.
That's 3x5 at 275 is a lot of work.
Pretty good amount of work.
That's cool.
He was cranking through it.
Yeah.
So again, his particular stats might be more volume than the average person might be able to do because of his background. So he had that work. And again, he's coming right out of a volume block.
Okay.
So we've built this work capacity up, and I knew it wasn't going to be anything crazy. Actually, now that I think about it, I think we actually started the program the week or 2 before the baby was actually due. So neat. I may have done another round of reducing the weight. I'll have to double check that. But the message is the same. We just pulled way, way back.
Yeah.
And I find this to really be useful, not just for newborns, but I've also done this for people that have some crazy project that spools up at work. Whatever life situation that comes in where you can't maintain your identity of training at that 1 to 2 hour mark, you almost have to kind of strip everything out and rebuild up
Yeah.
MED back from ground zero while still getting a full body workout over a longer period of time.
Yeah.
I would say that's the other key variable, that we change the window during which we are getting a full training session from maybe 1 or 2 days to a week.
Yeah.
So spread the stress way out and also reduce the stress on the individual day.
Mm-hmm. And it's still, you proved in that case with him that it worked really, really well. It was very effective training.
It was. He was able over the course, I think he got back to hitting PRs within 3 or 4 months.
Which, if you just see that number going from 135 to 115, that would probably feel like a blow. But if someone had stopped training for a month,
Right.
you're going to go down to those numbers and you've lost the habit, or you never got the chance to reconfigure your training in a way that actually worked for you. And so you kind of are digging yourself out of a hole for even longer.
Yeah, this is another conversation I have a lot, probably more frequently with people that are injured, but it's the same idea, or traveling,
Yeah.
Where we talk a lot about how you need to have progressive overload in order to drive hypertrophy and strength development. But what you need to maintain muscle mass is significantly lower.
Yeah.
70, 60, maybe even 50% of the intensity level. If you can get in and do some work, you'll be able to retain that muscle much longer than if you just completely stop. And I think that's a huge paradigm shift for people to go from, I must progressively overload, I must add 5 pounds, I must add a rep, I must add a set
And we're
every
basically
single
just
session.
maintaining muscle mass at that point anyway to get 2.5 more pounds
Right.
off
Yeah,
of a lift.
exactly. You're stoked if you get a 5-pound PR at, eventually in your training.
Yeah.
And yet people struggle with the idea of not being able to hit certain numbers.
Right.
If they're on the road without their normal equipment at some weird place, or they've got a kid and they only have 10 minutes to train.
Yeah.
There's as much value, I would argue, if not more value, of showing up and doing that something than stopping.
What was training like for you when you had a newborn?
Well, I was CrossFit at the time.
Okay. Life was now constantly varied also.
Yeah. My strategy, which I also recommend for most people that have a crazy or unpredictable day, was to do the workout before work.
Oh, yeah.
So there was in fact, this is how I found the gym that ended up completely changing my life forever, was I Googled gyms that were on the route. I would stop there, do my workout at 6 a.m, and then go to work.
The time when you had the most control and
Exactly.
reliability.
It was the most control, and it was a significant cost from a sleep standpoint, because at the time I was also bike commuting from Seattle over to Redmond, Washington, which for anybody that knows that is not an easy bike commute. And
voluntary hardship.
And
again.
involved catching a bus, a city bus at, I want to say it was like 5:15 or 5:20. I don't know. It was some crazy time. And bike commuting is popular in Seattle, and there were only 3 spots on the front of the bus, and occasionally it'd be full. And so I had to do everything I could to get down to the bus stop for that 5:20 spot, knowing that there was some probability that I'd have to wait for the next bus, which at that time of the day, they were not happening very often. But anyways, that's my main recommendation my first recommendation is invest in a home gym.
Yeah.
But regardless of whether you're home gym or training at a gym, typically early morning is the better time to do it. And I think that because if the other end of the spectrum would be to do it late at night.
Yeah.
But that's typically going to impact your sleep quality.
Right. You're a little too hyped up.
Mm-hmm. So I found it just to be easier to get it done beginning of the day. So that was basically right when I started. I think I'd been doing CrossFit for like 3 months or something like that when Claire was born. And I did that for another 9 months before switching over to a
lifting gym.
The same gym, but I just switched over to doing a linear progression with the main barbell lifts, because I didn't get any stronger for a year of CrossFit. Now, was it sleep and number of variables there?
Sure. But you did get stronger when you started doing linear progression.
Oh, yeah. As soon as I did a linear progression and drank a gallon of milk a day and put on like 80 pounds of body.
I've heard this works. Yes.
It did get me stronger for sure. And also a way higher body fat percentage than I ever
We'll have to
wanted.
do a callback to the Doughboy episode.
Yeah. Anyways, so this guy who's listening, but shall remain nameless, got back up to PRs. And so the way we did it, a couple of things that I think are also important to notice. I gave him more control over some of the variables. If he had extra gas in the tank, I told him, don't add weight, add reps, but don't exceed, I don't know, I think it was like on average, I usually said, don't do more than 8 reps per set. But just if you're feeling good, add in extra reps, get yourself a little bit closer to failure.
Okay.
And then if you're feeling like dirt, don't bail on the workout, but pull back a little bit on the weight or the reps. I just gave him more wiggle room, more flexibility. And if you're really not feeling it, let's just give me a heads up and we'll move the workout over. Again, this guy was pretty motivated, pretty good work capacity. So he was often, because we're only doing 1 lift a day, able to combine lifts.
Okay.
So because they were alternating upper lower, he could just merge 2 days into one and get caught up pretty easily. I think we may have even at one point he might have caught up on 3. The goal was one way or another, get these 4, 5, or 6 slots done by the end of the week.
Okay.
And early on, there were a couple times he didn't get all of them done. But I'm looking back through his program as we're sitting here. The fewest he ever did, he still got through 3 sessions in a week. Always.
Yeah. Okay.
He never
Well,
got
pretty
below
good.
that. Yeah.
That must be like reassuring. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, you can do this. And air quotes, just do it with 3 days a week.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple other things that jump out was that we did at one point, because I was still adding a little bit of weight every session, even from those adjusted numbers. Eventually that got to be too heavy.
Okay.
And so we started adding in some extra exercise variation. So I'd start putting in barbell rows or pause squats or lunges, just to give him a little bit of a psychological break and a little bit of variety while still hitting the main muscle groups that we're trying to go for. So I prioritized the compound lifts, but started playing with a little bit of variation when that became mentally fatiguing.
Yeah.
And it also just gave a reason to kind of reset and go with some lighter weights. Because again, the biggest hurdle at that phase, the decision to go train. Like once you start training, it feels great.
Right.
You're like super glad you did it. But that initial...
How do I get out of this space that I'm in, whether it's
Yeah.
the literal physical space that you're in or the mental space? Yeah.
Right. From another standard perspective, there were a lot of times where the rocker was in the background.
Sure.
You
Yeah,
know?
totally.
Which we see that all the time. We post
Yep.
about it. But, don't be afraid to have your kids in the gym. Be safe, of course.
Obviously. Yeah.
And sometimes training would get interrupted.
Yeah.
Sometimes he'd post 1 or 2 sets and the third one didn't happen because baby woke up. And that's another one of those standard things. Don't expect the session to be anything like what you were doing before.
Okay.
There's a John Bros quote where a day you touch the bar is a plus, a day you don't touch the bar is a minus.
Oh, yeah.
And you try to accumulate as many pluses as you can get. That's what really matters in the end.
Yeah. And I do believe it really does matter.
Yeah. Well, and he's now back, his training now. What I listened for as his coach was, and what I kept the channel open was for him to ask for more work. So when he started saying like, I think I've got more time, okay, well, let's add an accessory
A little bit.
twice a week. As long as he could keep hitting that, keep collecting more wins and more pluses, then I would add more. I tried not to just go whole hog back, but now we're back up to 1 or 2 barbell lifts a day and usually 1 or 2 accessories. His workouts are up to 25 minutes now. So he's still not back
super efficient
up to the full hour. Like earlier this week, he did top set of 5 bench, 2x5 back off and some chins.
Nice.
And then he did squat and deadlift, some dumbbell curls yesterday. So he's, getting through right around 25, 30 minutes.
So curious, like I love that feeling after training where I'm just like full body worked.
Yeah.
And it seems like that feeling is a little tougher to accomplish with that type of training spread. But I think that might also be part of the learning curve is, finding the enjoyment in whatever it ends up being then.
Yep. Yeah, I think that expectations management, that you're not going to come away feeling that,
Yeah.
but you will feel better than if you hadn't.
Especially 2 weeks. If I imagine 2 weeks having not trained,
Oh, yeah.
I don't want to feel like that. I would love to look back at 2 weeks and being like, sweet, I got in 6 sessions.
Right.
Nice.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's not a permanent change.
Yeah.
This just goes back to that, I think, perspective on long-term training, that the individual session is not the goal. The goal is 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 20 years. And building, I consider it a skill to be able to train that way.
Yeah.
Because there are points in your life, whether it's a kid or an injury or work or what else, that you need to know how to train through while still maintaining muscle mass and eventually getting back to building muscle mass.
Yeah.
That's part of the game. Part of the journey is learning how to get through those periods of time.
And still enjoy yourself.
Yeah, it's still fun.
Cool.
It's just not going to look the same.
Well, thank you so much for this, for my selfish questions. Maybe if my new dad clients are listening, this is for you.
Keep training, guys. Keep training.
Yeah, I appreciate
Don't stop.
all of that.
I am mostly motivated by fear.
Yeah.
Because I know if I stop, that first workout, especially the first squat workout,
so much soreness.
So brutal.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't want to feel that squishy. I am afraid of the squish.
Do you remember, it's been so long since I've done it, but it's still so vivid in my mind. That feeling of your muscles, they almost feel like they're tearing. This is and then you can't walk. I'm just going to scare our
like
audience
acute pain soreness.
Wait, for those that haven't trained, ignore what I just said. It feels amazing.
It's voluntary hardship at its finest. Awesome. Well, if people want more information about how to navigate their training, we have an amazing director of client experience. Her name is Nikki Berman. She is the mother of 3, and she's learned a lot about how to manage training through this type of situation. And like Andrew said, it really applies to any type of life where a wrench is thrown into what you've decided is ideal and helping you learn how to adapt and still keep going towards what's important to you. So if you want to schedule a call with Nikki, go to barbelllogic.com/experience. She'd love to have a chat with you. And that's it. Thanks for listening today. Thank you, Andrew. Give us a review. We'd love it.
Bye-bye.